Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today on mental well-being and youth-led engagement in Niagara, exploring the relationship. It's Sarah Webster speaking, knowledge broker with Niagara Connects. And also in our meeting room today we have Sarah Johnson, also with the Niagara Connects team, on to help us with the technology today. So if this is your first time joining a webinar with us, as you can hear, the audio does come through the phone. But please do make sure you've also clicked the link in your confirmation details so that you can join us in the online meeting room and see the slides as they're presented today. We do mute all of our participant lines, and this just helps us cut down on background noise as well as allow those that are joining in small groups to participate together. So if you do have any questions or comments during the presentation, please do use the chat pod down the left-hand side of your screen. And we'll certainly flag those then and save them for the discussion at the end of our call. We also record all of our webinars, and as a registrant of the webinar today, you'll receive an email within about a week with a link to the recording as well as a PDF of the slides and any other resources that are talked about today. If you're interested in any of our other webinars, please do visit the Niagara Knowledge Exchange. We post all of our recordings under our resources section there, as well as upcoming events that are happening and that kind of thing. So I encourage you to check it out, and we'll certainly put the link up for that later on as well. So I'd like to welcome our two presenters today, Lindsay Garofalo and David Lorenzo, both from Niagara Region Public Health. I've had a little bit of a taste of what they're going to talk about today, but I'm really excited to hear more. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to David to take us away.
Okay, thank you for having us on the webinar today. Lindsay and I look forward to kind of talking about our experiences with the REACT program and the evaluation that we conducted and some of the partners we've made along the way, and also to highlight some of the results. So thanks for having us. And we had a lot of internal staff who've really helped us along the way as well. So wanted to make sure I highlighted that. And we are going to talk a little bit about some of the qualitative research that was done. We'll highlight it very briefly, but this was a mixed study with qualitative and quantitative research questions. The qualitative ones were actually administered by Dr. Richard Mitchell from Brock University, so we will highlight it very briefly. We're going to talk today more about the quantitative data, the types of questions that we ask, and kind of what we heard. Hopefully the presentation also meets the objective of shedding some light on kind of our journey with this program over the 10-plus years, and how the success or some of the success that we're seeing has really influenced how we work at public health and how we've developed new programs that have differences, but the youth engagement component is very similar. So kind of the evolution of our work at public health as well and how we work with young people is something we want to get into today beyond the results. So from a public health background, the far right of that slide, reduction in risky health behaviors, is something that we're really striving toward. That's one of our major aims in public health. And one of the things that a lot of the literature has said over the years is that engaging young people and providing youth development opportunities, doing this really well and putting resources towards it, does decrease the reduction in risky health behaviors. So from the perspective of not only wanting to work with young people and having them be creative minds and collaborative partners in our projects, one of the major benefits that we felt we could achieve by doing this well is reducing their risky behaviors. So that was like another impact or one of the benefits of doing this work as well. So just to kind of give a brief explanation of youth engagement, I'm sure many of you on the call know enough about it, or some might be pretty new to it, but the diagram outlines the goal for our youth engagement work at Niagara Region Public Health and the programs that we offer. We directly work with young people. We also have a community of practice, which some of you might be involved in as well in Niagara, where we bring together adults from youth-serving organizations where public health will facilitate those meetings. And what we're really trying to do is bring all that intelligence into one room and work together on different initiatives. So we have a community of practice as well, but we're going to talk more today, especially about the REACT program. That was the program that is now in its 12th year, and we wanted to really assess going back to our former peer leaders who are paid staff with us, really understanding their experiences and how it had, what type of impact it had on them. The Youth Advisory Committee is one of our committees as well. That's a volunteer committee we run at Public Health. I think it's in its 5th or 6th year now. They meet monthly. We're not going to get too much into the Youth Advisory Committee, but that was formed out of the success we were having with the REACT program. And finally, the Young Adult Peer Leader program, which is where we work closely with community partners. We hire 5 university students who go out and go to youth-serving organizations to work with young people. The distinction I want to make is that the REACT program and the Young Adult Peer Leader program have an asterisk beside them. They're paid positions for young people. The Youth Advisory Committee is a volunteer experience for our students. And the Youth Advisory Committee, I should also highlight, REACT is for high school students. The Young Adult Peer Leader program is for university students. And the Youth Advisory Committee is for students who are from grade 7 to university. So I'm going to get into REACT program a little bit to provide a bit of a background. REACT has been in operation since 2005, where we hired high school students. The Ministry of Health provided funding through the tobacco program to make this program happen. We have evolved this over the years to cover other health issues with an emphasis now on sexual health, tobacco, and mental health. In the past 10 years, from 2005 to 2015, we did the study in August 2015. We've hired 125 peer leaders throughout those 10 years. 65 of them participated in the study, which was, we were quite pleased with the return rate on the questions. And some of the work that they typically do is around health promotion projects, which sometimes is simply as raising awareness about a health issue, or it could be all the way to policy and trying to implement change around a policy that has a positive impact for young people in Niagara or throughout the whole province. So just to provide some examples, REACT has been instrumental in advancing youth knowledge of health issues in Niagara, advocating to various levels of government for policy changes to make the healthy choice the easiest choice. Over the past 10 years, we had some reason to believe that this program for the REACT students was having a significant impact on them, and we wanted to really measure this and get a better understanding. Was this in fact the case? And we felt that the 10-year anniversary was a good time for us to start to gauge and start to ask some really good questions. So as I referenced earlier, in August 2015, Brock and Public Health developed a mixed methodology study that asked the question, what impact did the REACT program have on the high school student? And we coordinated the quantitative questions, and as I mentioned earlier, Brock the qualitative questions. So just moving the slides ahead a little bit now. The purpose of the research project. So we wanted to measure whether the way we were operating was having an impact on the youth involved was the major variable we wanted to measure. So we had heard from a lot of the students, a lot of them would contact us when they were in college or university or in the workforce, how much they got out of the program. So we wanted to start to capture that data. We run other programs by sharing the power between the youth and the adults, and we wanted to understand, was this working? We also wanted to make sure that we wanted to build on our strengths, and if there's limitations that were highlighted, we wanted to try to address those as well. Like there was maybe an opportunity for us to really look at and say, is it working? And if it's working, great. What can we do to improve our strengths or work on our weaknesses? We also want to work with Brock University. We're in the process of trying to get this written up. We have it written up, the report, and we want to get it published because we really want to legitimize the work, but we also want to make sure that any of our partners have access to this data as well. If you're running very similar programs or you're interested in doing something and you have to go to senior management to justify your case, which is sometimes the case, we want to make that accessible for everybody. And we also want to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing. So today's a great opportunity for us to have a real captive audience and to provide not only what we heard and what we saw, but we also want to make sure that if there's any connection we can make after the fact that we do that. So just kind of going into our objectives, our first one was to assess if the REACT program provided youth developmental opportunities for the peer leaders. That was our first one. Secondly, if the REACT experience provided developmental opportunities linked to developmental outcomes. And Lindsay's going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. And our second objective was to explore how a young person's understanding of health has been impacted by their participation in the REACT program. So really wanting to understand what impact does it have on them now. And I think when Lindsay goes through the methodology and the questions that we asked, I think they did a really good job of drawing that out. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Lindsay, who's now going to go through some of the procedures.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So I'm going to jump into our methodology and how we went about going to do this. As Dave mentioned, we did do a mixed methods study, so I'll talk a little bit about each component, so the qualitative and the quantitative component. So starting with the quantitative piece, we did an online survey, and we recruited via social media and email. As Dave mentioned, we had 125 peer leaders who had been through the program over the past 10 years. And we were able to make contact with 114 of them. So thanks to one of our wonderful youth engagement specialists who took the time and energy over the years to keep a really robust list of the peer leaders who had been a part of the program and to update their contact information. And thanks to that, we were able to make contact with 114 of the former or present peer leaders of the 125. So of that 114 who were able to send recruitment materials to, 65 of them participated in the online survey. The distribution in terms of male-female ratio was 72% female, 23% male, and there were some that didn't identify gender on the questionnaire. And what I want to highlight here, this is actually very representative of what our REACT groups or cohorts look like each year, where they're about 70% female participation and about 30% male participation. Our age range of the participants was anywhere between the ages of 17 and 27. And the way in which we analyzed this data is we used hierarchical regression models, which is based on the theory around correlation, where you're looking at the relationship between variables, and the regression models allowed us to look at a number of different variables at the same time. For the qualitative component, as Dave mentioned, this is the component Dr. Richard Mitchell had taken on, and we're speaking on his behalf today, talking about some of this procedure. So we did some purposeful recruiting via email for the focus group. We wanted no more than 10 individuals to participate in the focus group, and we really were trying to be purposeful of trying to recruit peer leaders from each one of our 10 cohorts. We were able to recruit 7 peer leaders from a variety of different REACT cohorts to be able to get to hear the voices of those that were involved in the program from day one and those that were involved in the program as it evolved. The focus group itself took about an hour and a half. Dr. Mitchell facilitated the discussion and audio recorded the discussion. The audio recording was then transcribed verbatim, and he used grounded theory methodology to analyze the transcripts. Moving on to our measurement tools, so this is specifically speaking to the quantitative component of the study. So as you can see on the slide here, we used 4 validated measures within the online survey. So these were tools we went to the literature to find, and we also had an additional demographic section of the questionnaire, and that was really around asking which cohort the peer leader that was responding to the survey was in, how many years they participated in the programs, where they are now in life in terms of education, work, if they were working, which industry they were working in, all those sorts of things. The 4 measures that are on the slide here, I'll just briefly talk about each one of them. So the Youth Experience Survey, we use that to assess the extent to which the REACT program provided experiences in 6 domains of development. And I'll get into what each of these domains means a little bit later, but just to list them off now. So this survey assessed the extent to which the REACT program provided experiences in identity exploration, initiative experiences, interpersonal relationships, adult networks and social capital, basic skills, and teamwork and social skills. So again, the respondents responded to this survey reflecting on their experience in the REACT program, and it did an assessment of the extent to which REACT provided opportunities within each of those 6 domains of development. We also looked at a civic responsibility survey. So we looked at the respondents' sort of community awareness, knowledge, and investment in helping to improve their community. So it really assessed the desire to give back to one's community. The resilience scale, this measured the extent to which individuals could overcome daily life stressors and adversity. This is one scale we're really interested in looking at whether the REACT experience was associated with resilience. So looking at the responses to the youth experience survey and looking at the relationship that it had to the responses in the resilience scale. And the last one on the slide here is entitled The Multidimensional Scale of Perceived Social Support. So we measured social support primarily to get an understanding of the social support provided or available to the youth peer leaders that were a part of our program, specifically because we know that the resilience literature talks a lot about how there's a really strong connection between social support in one's life and resilience. And in recognizing that there is such a strong association here, what we wanted to do was actually statistically control for social support when looking at the relationship between the REACT experience and resilience, because we wanted to sort of isolate that social support component, take it out of the equation, and look specifically at whether the REACT experience was associated with resilience. So in terms of our results with respect to the quantitative component, this slide here just talks about is, in general, we looked at the means, so the scores on each one of the domains in the youth experience survey, and what we found was that REACT provided quite a bit or more experience in those first 5 domains. So identity experiences, this was all about so assess the extent to which the REACT program provided opportunity for the young people to kind of explore who they were, what defined them, what interests them, what their strengths, weaknesses were, what they didn't like. And what our findings demonstrate is that REACT provided opportunity for the young people to really explore what they were passionate about and what they were strong in and what they might needed to spend some more time and energy sort of focusing on. The findings also demonstrated that REACT provided initiative experiences, so opportunity for the young people to step up and sort of take initiative, do things the way they would like to do it, and sort of make a difference in their community. Interpersonal relationships, so again we found that REACT provided opportunity in this domain, and this is all about developing relationships with others. Within the REACT program we try and find unique and diverse ways to get the young people to work with one another. And the same to be said with the next domain here, which was teamwork and social skills. Again, REACT provided quite a bit of experience in this domain. And this is all about encouraging the young people to work with others, to be put in situations where they have to problem solve and use social skills to negotiate and navigate relationships. Adult networks and social capital, this is all about providing opportunity for the young people to work alongside adults, sort of share power with them, make decisions alongside adults, and develop networks within the community. And this is also something that REACT provided quite a bit of experience for the young people in. And what we'll see in the next couple of slides is that this is actually associated with resilience as well. And this is something that we try and do quite a lot in the REACT program, is not only sort of allowing the young people to make connections with the adult staff that directly support them, but also to provide opportunities for the young people working in the REACT program, our peer leaders, to connect with other community agencies and organizations and connect with the adults working in those organizations. Basic skill development, this was a domain that REACT provided a little bit of experience in, not so much as the other ones. And this is about physical skills, emotion regulation. And so REACT did provide opportunities in this one, but just not as much as the other ones. So in terms of what this all means and the relationship to resilience, as I mentioned, we ran regression models, which is essentially looking at the relationship between those variables on the left-hand side and the concept of resilience. So what we found was that this whole model, those domains of development and social support, were significant in predicting resilience. So there was an association between this model. We also found that even when taking out social support of the model, or taking social support out of the model and looking specifically at those 4 domains of development there was still a significant relationship with resilience. And what the asterisks along the left-hand side demonstrate are the domains that were the strongest predictors of resilience. And what we found was that the identity experiences that REACT provides, so that opportunity for the young people to kind of explore their interests, figure out what they're passionate about, what they're strong at, what they're weak in, was really strongly associated with resilience. So jumping to the next slide and looking again at those domains of development and the relationship they have to civic responsibility, we found something very similar, again, that the relationship was statistically significant, and even when statistically controlling for education level, and we controlled for that because the civic responsibility literature demonstrated that there was a relationship between higher levels of education and responsibility, so we wanted to control for that and looked specifically at those domains of development that REACT provided opportunity. Again, this was statistically significant, and as you can see, the domains that were the strongest predictors of civic responsibility, which is defined as this desire to give back to the community, were initiative experiences. So again, that opportunity for the young people when they're involved in the REACT program to take initiative, encourage them to kind of figure out the way and how to do it, as well as those adult networks and social capital. Those were the 2 domains that were most strongly associated with civic responsibility. So we're jumping to our qualitative findings, and again, we're speaking on behalf of Dr. Mitchell and talking about these findings. And so what he found was that, and looking at the transcripts of the focus groups, and he used grounded theory methodology to look at these, he found 4 sort of underlying themes, and those themes were related to a larger overarching theme, which I'll get to in a minute. So these underlying themes were sort of defined the specific experiences that the REACT program provided. And those were in the areas of advocacy, professional development, meaningful participation, and power sharing. So the young people really talked about health, being advocates for their own health, but also health being a real social justice issue. So there's excerpts from quotes that were actually within the transcripts under each one of these themes here, and I'll speak to a couple of them. Professional development was also an underlying theme where REACT talked a lot about, the former peer leaders talked a lot about the REACT experience in the context of professional development, that it was a step in their professional development process, and it really helped to springboard them into different activities later in life. Meaningful participation was another way in which the young people described their experience in the REACT program. And one participant had said, our participation in relationship with authority was really democratic. One of my biggest takeaways from REACT was kids have a voice. So that was one way in which a former peer leader talked about how the meaningful participation was a big part of the REACT experience. And the final underlying theme here is around power sharing. Much of the conversation within the focus group talked about how influential and how important that power sharing component of the program was. And one individual stated, it was the first time in my life sitting in a room with adults who would be like, what do you have to say about that? Especially going back 10 years. That was pretty novel. So those are just a snapshot of some of the excerpts that are associated with each one of those 4 underlying themes. And what Dr. Mitchell found as the overarching theme was that the young people's understanding of the REACT experience was related to enhanced mental well-being. So some of them explicitly talked about how being a part of the REACT program was associated with their mental well-being, and others talked about it in a more implicit way. So this excerpt at the bottom of this slide here is a more explicit example of how someone linked the REACT experience to their mental well-being. And this individual said, well, it really helped me break out of my shell, to be able to talk to people, to be able to come up with ideas. I think without REACT, I would never have wanted to make a difference. I would never have had a passion to do anything, and I'm thankful for that. So that's just one example of how mental health was an overarching theme in much of the discussion around the young people's understanding of the REACT experience and how that was associated with their own health. And then those 4 underlying themes were ways in which those sort of experiences were associated with mental health. So jumping back to that slide that Dave had started with in the beginning, where in the literature it's been identified that youth engagement is a step in youth development, and that is associated with a reduction in risky health behaviors. And what we were able to kind of unpack through this process of this evaluation was that our youth engagement program, our REACT program, was associated with developmental opportunities, and those developmental opportunities were associated with resilience and enhanced mental well-being. And we know that there's a strong tie and connection in what the literature is saying around resilience and enhanced mental well-being and long-term health outcomes. So what we're able to kind of demonstrate through this process is that youth engagement is really a way to sort of lead to youth development and a reduction in risky health behaviors, and it's a valuable investment. So some other conclusions and recommendations, what we feel quite strongly about in terms of what these findings are telling us is that there's a real value in engaging youth in organizational operations. What the study was able to show was that there's significant value for the youth themselves. They're able to walk away with pretty significant and impactful experiences that are important to them in the moment, but also long-term and down the road. In terms of the next point here, this is also something we feel quite strongly about, that these findings really demonstrate the value in investing in the concept of resilience, that it's something that is going to pay off long-term for young people, and it's a valuable investment for organizations. And something that we talk about quite a lot in the youth world is really about trusting the process. So for those of you on the line who are adult staff working with youth, this may resonate with you, that that's a reminder you constantly have to be telling yourself around trusting the process, and that although the youth might take a path or a process that's quite different than what you might have envisioned when you start, it's really important to trust the process that they follow, because the outcome is likely going to be what you had envisioned or even better. And I think that sort of phrase really also demonstrates what these findings are showing us, that we really have to trust the process when you're working with young people, and that although resilience is a concept and mental health is a concept that's not very tangible at the time when you're trying to look at whether or not your program is having an impact on people, but really trusting that the opportunity and the experiences that you're providing the young people are going to pay off down the road for them. The last point on the slide here is just, again, focusing on those domains of development and the areas in which we saw those domains of development being associated with resilience and civic responsibility. And so what we're sort of concluding here is finding ways through your youth engagement programs or youth and development programs to sort of foster these areas of development. So finding ways for the young people that you work with to take initiative, so encouraging them to take initiative, putting them in situations where they're forced to take initiative will serve them well down the road. This identity exploration, this is something we try to do quite often in the REACT program, is providing diverse opportunities for the young people. So 1 month they might be working on developing content for a workshop. The next month they might be doing public speaking at a conference. And this diversity and experience helps them to figure out what they like, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and what they're really, really passionate about. Some of the other domains just around interpersonal relationships, so putting young people in situations where they have to navigate difficult social situations, and work with people they might not typically work with. What we find working with our young people is often when they're in a group setting, they might start to gravitate to a couple of individuals who are like-minded and who have similar interests. And what we try and do throughout their time with us is really encourage them to step outside of those comfortable relationships and even put them in situations where they're working with people that they might not typically gravitate towards. In terms of teamwork and social skills, adult networks and social capital, again, these were domains that we did find a relationship between these and resilience and civic responsibility. And again, something that we'll continue to try and do in our program is find ways to build those social networks or those adult networks and social capital with our young people who are part of the program. Partnering with other community agencies and community partners is something that the study demonstrated value in, and will continue to invest in that process. In terms of limitations and strengths, we just want to mention from a sort of evaluation perspective. So this was the analysis that we ran for the quantitative component was correlational. So we obviously can't make the conclusion that the REACT program caused young people a part of the program to be resilient. It could very well be the other way around, where it's the resilient individuals that come to be a part of the REACT program. In terms of generalizability, again, very specific to our REACT program, although we do find that there are takeaways to some of our other youth programs. Sample size is another one here that I just want to quickly speak to. We had 65 individuals participate in the online component, and we had 7 participate in the qualitative component. And 65 from a quantitative component isn't a very high number when you look at academic literature and things that are published in literature. However, so there's limitations around sort of making some conclusions and recommendations around our sample size. However, for those of you that work with youth on a daily basis, sample size is a constant issue and something that we battle with. Being able to look at the relationship between some of these things within small sample sizes is something that we're going to continue to try and figure out how to do. Because it's very difficult to get large sample sizes for this kind of work. In terms of strengths, we had what we felt was a pretty respectable response rate. Our findings do align with what the literature is saying around youth engagement and youth development. And what we do take away as a positive from this is also a different way of evaluating youth programming. Typically, when you think of evaluation, you think pre-post tests, and you think sort of measuring differences before and after. And that's not always easy when you're doing youth work. So we were able to apply a bit of a different model here, and we felt that it was able to give us some interesting findings and results. And then, of course, the findings really demonstrate the components of our youth programming. So again, those domains of development, that advocacy, that professional development, identity exploration, initiative experiences. So really understanding what parts of the youth engagement program are associated with those longer-term outcomes are really helpful for us moving forward in planning programs and planning initiatives. So I'm going to talk quickly about lessons learned with the evaluation, and then I'm going to pass it over to Dave to talk about a couple of things to finish us off. In terms of the lessons learned with evaluation, this definitely couldn't have been possible without an academic partnership. Dr. Richard Mitchell has been an advocate and a mentor for the REACT program since it started, and we're very thankful for that partnership that we've developed along the way. And as I mentioned, we couldn't have pulled this evaluation off without him. Staying current with literature and theory was a big one for us, being able to sort of link what we knew anecdotally or felt, and being able to link that to evaluation and what the literature was saying was very helpful for us in this process. And being able to continually do that and to stay current with that is a priority and important for us. Using validated tools to measure the construct. So this was something we're very fortunate to have been able to hire a summer student in the summer of 2015 to support this work and to really drive it forward. And that summer student spent a significant amount of time sort of combing through the literature and finding tools that were really measuring what we felt were important concepts. Again, I spoke to this concept, the next point already, and really finding unique ways to do evaluation. There's lots of unique ways out there in the youth world to do evaluation, and we feel encouraged by that literature, and we'll continue to kind of find unique ways to do traditional evaluation work. And again, as I mentioned, a product of really diligent adult staff who worked in our program and maintaining a robust database of youth involved in the program. And we wouldn't have been able to pull off this evaluation without that. And I think that's certainly a recommendation that we would throw out there for any of you that are working in the youth engagement or youth development world, to continue to try and stay in contact with the youth that you've been involved with in the past. Is a real value, obviously, for personal connection and to be able to stay up to date on what they're up to, but also for activities such as this one, to be able to get back to them 10 years later and ask them to fill out a survey for you is pretty impactful. So I'm going to pass it over to Dave to talk a little bit about lessons learned working with young people, and also to kind of talk about our next steps.
Okay, thanks, Lindsay. I'm just going to quickly talk about lessons learned working with young people more from an organizational perspective. Like I mentioned and Lindsay mentioned earlier, 2005, we received funding to run these programs and to hire adults. And I think one of the things we did really well is we wrote a good job description that for our adult staff, the ones who are going to be working closely with youth, it was a really new position for us. So we wanted to make sure that we brought in people with the right skill set. We also had incredible senior management support to take chances and to try something innovative, and sometimes knowing we're going to get things wrong, but also understanding that this had so much potential. So we had senior management support, so much so that pretty early on as a public health department, we at times developed strategic goals, and youth engagement was a strategic goal pretty early on once the program got started, which just added more credibility to the work, I believe. The other lessons as far as an organizational standpoint is there are some challenges. Some of them deal with evaluating what people look at as being successful. It takes time. I know Lindsay talked about, in a perfect world we have, pre and post tests, and we can show and we can illustrate what types of success we're dealing with. With this type of work, it's not that easy. There's also sometimes that thought that quantity and how many people we're actually hiring and how many people we're outreaching to, and what types of legislative changes are being made, is how you determine whether the program is reaching its success or not. But there's also that component of quality as well. And in this study with with a potential of 120 former peer leaders and having 67 respond, we were quite happy with that. And although 65 or 67 is not a huge number, I think the quality of what they got out of the program spoke volumes. A couple of other things working with young people that I think we've learned, or I've learned over the years, is the whole notion, and this is for any staff, is the whole notion of coaching and supporting and making sure that they have a clear understanding of what the expectations are or how they can influence the expectations, and also having those conversations when things are going really well with them to have as a growth and development opportunity, or when things aren't going so well, having those honest conversations to provide insight into what our expectations are. I think that's a big deal as well. And I think that kind of came out. I think we were doing that, or we're doing that quite well, based on some of Lindsay's discussion around professional development and adult networks that our young people have achieved, providing those opportunities, but also providing feedback and providing insight into how one's doing, and highlighting opportunities for young people really does speak to that professional development later on when they're done the program. So those are, from an organizational standpoint, some of the lessons I think that we've learned. They're just a few of probably many. So I'm just going to go to our last slide, which talks about next steps. We really appreciate, I think there's 60-plus people on the call today. Lindsay and I wanted to not only, we had a couple goals. Some of them were around reporting the results to internal staff, and to also really reach out to our partners, because they've been valuable throughout this process as well. I'm sure there's many of you on this call who work with public health or the REACT program or our youth advisory committee or our young adult peer leader program works with. So, we want to thank everyone for their support along the way as well. We are working with Dr. Richard Mitchell on making sure that this literature and this study gets published. So that's one of our next steps as well. So we're really trying to get out there as much as we can to highlight the results, but also to ensure that it gets out there to the masses, if you will. So that's often done through publishing. So that concludes our formal presentation with respect to our findings and a little bit about how public health works with young people. So I'm going to, turn it over to Sarah, who's moderating, and I guess there's some time left over if there's any questions over the phone or texting, typing in the questions. I'll pass it over to Sarah now, though.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. This is our time for discussion. What a lot of fantastic information to take in and consider, hopefully from wherever you're joining us from, wherever your organization is. Do we have any, if you have a question, you can either type it into the chat pod down the left-hand side of your screen, or if you prefer to ask it verbally, you can unmute your individual line by pressing *7. But we do have a question here from Mary asking, are most of the REACT youth from Niagara, or are some post-secondary students from outside of Niagara?
All of our REACT students were living in Niagara at the time of participating in the program. So as Dave mentioned, it's a program for high school students, REACT specifically. So all of the students who were a part of the REACT program during high school were from Niagara. Having said that, many of them don't live in the area now and have migrated out to, are either living on university campuses outside of Niagara or have graduated from post-secondary education and are living and working in other regions throughout Ontario. In terms of some of our other programs, our youth programs, so our Young Adult Peer Leader program, which we hire university-aged students to work with youth-serving organizations, that particular program does hire and work with young people that may live outside of Niagara region.
Great. Jamie's asked, just going back to the results of your survey, what did the minus symbol mean besides some of your numbers that you had? And perhaps we can go back to that slide as well.
I can flip back to that number. Okay, so the minus just indicated the relationship between the direction of the relationship between the raw numbers and the outcome. It doesn't speak to the magnitude or the impact of the number. It's just the direction.
Great, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments for David and Lindsay? And or I'd love to hear from, if you're on the phone joining from another organization and you're considering, you either have engaged youth in some way or you're considering doing so, I'd love to hear too from your experience. Nicole has asked here, can you repeat the name of the program where university students work with youth-serving organizations?
Yes, certainly. That's the Young Adult Peer Leader program, and that's, I think we've been in our 5th or 6th year now. So we hire, I should have explained this one better, so sorry for that, but that is the program where we hire, usually in the summertime as we're gearing up to do all our recruitment, we hire 5 or 6 university students, and we have really great connections with about 12 youth-serving organizations. So we bring in these university-age students who work with us from September until May or June. So it's like a 9 or 10-month contract. It's a paid position. And they work very closely with usually 2 community organizations. So they might work with a YMCA, and they might work with a, the Raft or the Fort, or we have quite a few partners that we work closely with. So the student will go into these organizations, usually weekly, and work with students who are going in there after school. And a lot of times, a lot of great discussions about health, or it's around developing health programs that are aimed at their peers that are whatever that age might be. Usually the kids are between the ages of about 10 to 17 or so. So that's the program where we bring in the 5 university-age students.
And David, how would an organization get involved with that program if they aren't already?
Yeah, they can contact Lindsay or I think our information might be on one of the slides, or I'd be happy to share our information after the fact. But yeah, we can definitely look at that and determine if it's a good fit or not. I think our contact information is on the last slide.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to pull up this final one because it does have the contact information there. Any other questions or comments from those joining today on the phone? We have a question here. Are there opportunities to align the concept of the value of youth developing connections with adults with the age-friendly work being done in Niagara? People of all ages benefit from social connections.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I know social connection and just general community engagement are important concepts and are something that I value for all individuals in the community. So just my personal opinion, I definitely think that that sort of theory and those connections probably have similar relationships or similar impact in other parts of the community.
Absolutely, and I know that with the age-friendly work, there's certainly a component of that is around social participation, and certainly looking at some of those intergenerational relationships. In Brantford area, they had a relationship with Wilfrid Laurier University where an upper year writing class was paired with local retirees in the area who came in once a week, and they worked on writing projects together. And it was so well received. Even after the program ended, the youth and retirees stayed in contact with each other, that the relationships were long lasting. And it had such an impact that Laurier has picked it up as a permanent course and is also looking at other ways that they can incorporate intergenerational programming into some of their other courses as well. So would certainly be something that would be interesting to explore. Any other questions from those on the phone? Okay. Well, thank you very much to both of our presenters today for walking us through these results and what has been, I mean, when you look back, as you said, it's been 10 years, but the results are pretty outstanding when you look at the impact that that's had at an organizational level and for the youth themselves at an individual level. So as I said, we will certainly share a recording and PDF of the slides within about a week. Sarah, I see, has put up a link to get connected. If you're not already on our e-news, on our distribution list, please do consider joining up. You'll receive invitations to future events that we host, as well as our Friday weekly e-blast of new events, resources, blogs that have been added to the Niagara Knowledge Exchange. So we'd love to get you on that list to make sure that we stay connected to you. And when we do close the meeting room today, you will be directed to a very short survey. It's just a couple of evaluation questions so that we can make sure that we're doing the right thing here and keeping you connected to the information that's of most interest to you. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to join us this afternoon, and we'll sign off there. Take care, everybody.